Welcome to Star Watch Now, your front row seat to all the hottest gossip, drama, and breaking news from the world of entertainment. If it's trending, shocking, or star-studded, we're covering it. Stay tuned. You won't want to miss what's coming next. This isn't a drama. It's not a scene from a film. This happened live, raw, and it broke 1 million hearts in a single moment. Wang Yibo, a man known for daring stunts, flawless dancing, and fearless charisma, suddenly fell, not on stage, but from a towering platform. Cameras kept rolling, fans kept screaming, and the world stood still. And then Xiao Zhan appeared, tears on his face.
No bodyguards.
No stage lights, just a broken man running toward the person who means everything to him. It was meant to be a celebration, an afternoon filled with artistry, unity, and hope. The atmosphere was electric as thousands gathered in anticipation. The stage lights beamed, music pulsed through the venue, and Wang Yibo, renowned for his flawless performances and magnetic energy, prepared for what was supposed to be just another extraordinary act. But in one devastating instant, that illusion shattered. As he stepped onto a raised platform during a rehearsal, something went terribly wrong. The structure beneath him gave way, and before anyone could react, he fell. There was no stunt, no safety net, just the harsh sound of reality hitting the ground. A collective scream erupted from the audience. Some thought it was part of the performance. It wasn't. Chaos swept through the arena like a wave. Technicians froze, dancers ran, and camera crews instinctively lowered their lenses. Not out of professionalism, but out of horror. This wasn't entertainment. This was a life teetering on the edge. And the silence that followed was more deafening than any applause could ever be. Social media exploded. Within minutes, videos of the fall were circulating globally, igniting shock and heartbreak across cultures and languages. Hashtags filled the digital sky. Prayers, disbelief, grief. People who had never met him cried as though they had lost a friend. Because somehow, in his vulnerability, Yibo had become more than a performer. He had become a reflection of fragility, of humanity. That moment marked a turning point. The lights no longer dazzled. The music no longer mattered. A man's life hung in the balance, and for millions, time stood still. The hospital's sterile halls had never seen such a storm of emotion. Long before the cameras arrived, before the headlines could spin their stories, Xiao Zhan was already there, rushing in with a face pale from fear, not fame. There were no velvet ropes, no fanfare. Just a man, breathless and broken, trying to get to someone he loved. Security guards didn't recognize panic dressed in black. Nurses didn't know that the trembling man before them had sold out stadiums. But none of that mattered to Xiao Zhan. In that moment, he wasn't a celebrity. He wasn't even an actor. He was simply a brother, trying to push past protocol to reach Wang Yibo's bedside. He pleaded not with entitlement, but with raw desperation. Every word cracked under the weight of grief. He clutched his phone as if it could anchor him, whispered prayers into its speaker, hoping they'd find Yibo in the dark space between life and death. When the hospital refused to let him in, he didn't shout. He simply slumped into a corner, eyes glazed, hands shaking, lips moving in silent chants of please, please, please. To onlookers, it was a scene that stripped away all illusions. This wasn't for cameras. This wasn't performative. It was pure love laid bare. Painful, messy, honest. In a world that often sees male friendships as restrained, distant, this moment shattered that narrative. Xiao Zhan showed up not because he had to, but because there was nowhere else he could be. And in that waiting room, beneath cold fluorescent lights, the world saw the most beautiful kind of courage. The kind that refuses to walk away. Outside the hospital walls, the world waited. But it wasn't just waiting. It was grieving, praying, and burning with questions. Inside, sterile silence clung to the air while doctors moved like ghosts, fighting time, fighting fate. Wang Yibo's life hung in the balance, and though machines kept his heart beating, it was the love outside those walls that made the real noise. Fans gathered not to idolize, but to anchor hope. They came with candles, not cameras. Flowers, not flesh. They sang softly, cried openly, and stood in vigil like family, because in their hearts, they were. Across cities, countries, languages, and cultures, people lit up timelines with prayers. Hashtags didn't trend for fame this time, they surged with purpose. It felt as if an entire continent was holding its breath. But along with faith came fury. The cold refusal to let Xiao Zhan see his closest friend stirred something deeper. How could love be measured by visiting hours? How could protocol outweigh humanity? Online petitions erupted. Debates blazed. Some hospital staff, off the record, admitted they had never seen a celebrity beg. Not for attention, but for a glimpse, a touch, a final word. In a world desensitized to drama, this was different. This was real. Fans didn't just want updates, they wanted justice. For Yibo, for Xiao Zhan, for anyone who had ever waited outside an ICU door with their soul trembling. Through live streams, tweets, and trembling hands, they sent a message to the world. Love is not a privilege of the famous. It is the most human instinct of all, and it demands to be let in. News of Wang Yibo's critical condition didn't just ripple, it roared. What began as a silent emergency behind hospital doors exploded into a global outpouring of emotion. The world watched not as passive spectators, but as witnesses to something raw and deeply human. Xiao Zhan's silent vigil, his tear-stained face, the helpless pacing in hospital corridors. These moments, captured by shaky hands and shared through trembling voices, struck a chord deeper than celebrity. They became universal. Across continents, people who had never heard of Yibo or Xiao Zhan before were suddenly leaning in, hearts clenched. In Seoul, fans lit candles in parks. In Tokyo, train stations played soft fan-recorded instrumentals in tribute. In Paris and New York, digital billboards flashed messages of hope and solidarity. Even those who didn't know their names found something painfully familiar in the story, a memory of their own grief, a time they too sat waiting, praying, bargaining with fate. The voice message that broke through, Xiao Zhan whispering, "When you wake up, let's go to the sea and eat hot pot again," was translated into dozens of languages within hours. Not as a slogan, but as a cry that resonated with anyone who has ever loved and feared losing. Comment sections turned into confessionals. People wrote about lost siblings, friends they hadn't spoken to in years, chances never taken. This wasn't entertainment. It was a mirror, a reminder that behind every headline lies a heartbeat. Behind every star is a soul. And sometimes, one man's heartbreak becomes the world's awakening. In those days, it didn't matter what country you were from. Everyone everywhere was holding their breath for a miracle. At dawn, when the sky was still clinging to the last whispers of night, the silence inside the hospital finally cracked. A doctor emerged, eyes tired yet holding something fragile and golden, a smile. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, hope was no longer a desperate wish. It was real. Wang Yibo had made it through surgery. He was alive. The miracle the world had been praying for had arrived, not with loud triumph, but in the quiet, sacred breath of survival. Xiao Zhan didn't react with celebration. He collapsed, not from fear this time, but from overwhelming relief. On the cold, sterile floor, he wept openly. Every tear was an unspoken prayer answered. For days, he had fought not with fists, but with presence. And now, that presence had found its purpose. The news spread faster than fire. Cheers erupted outside the hospital gates, not because a celebrity had survived, but because humanity had won, because love had stayed when it mattered. When Wang Yibo opened his eyes, blinking slowly against the pale light, the first word he formed with dry lips was a name. Xiao Zhan. That single word carried the weight of everything he had endured. The fear, the darkness, the long drift between life and something beyond it. They didn't need grand speeches when they saw each other again. They didn't need anything but that gaze. Two souls recognizing that they had walked to the edge of the world and come back, hand in hand. It wasn't just a miracle of medicine. It was a miracle of devotion. And for everyone who watched it unfold, it was proof that sometimes, love really is strong enough to bring someone back. What happened between Wang Yibo and Xiao Zhan was more than a moment of tragedy. It became a story that redefined how we understand connection, vulnerability, and what truly matters when everything else is stripped away. In a world that often feels fast, distracted, and superficial, their bond reminded us that real love, whether in friendship, family, or something in between, isn't loud. It's steady. It shows up in hospital corridors at 3 a.m., in whispered voice messages, and in the silent grip of a hand refusing to let go. This wasn't about celebrity. It wasn't about status, fans, or headlines. It was about a fundamental truth, that when life hangs by a thread, no amount of fame or fortune matters more than someone choosing to stand beside you, no matter what. Xiao Zhan's refusal to leave, to pretend to be strong when he wasn't, shattered the illusion that vulnerability is weakness. Instead, it revealed the quiet power of showing up, not as a star but as a brother, a friend, a human being. The global response showed us that empathy has no borders. Strangers across languages and cultures cried for someone else's pain. People called their loved ones, forgave old wounds, and remembered what it means to care deeply. In classrooms, homes, and quiet personal moments, this story sparked reflection on who we would sit beside when the world falls apart, and who might sit beside us. Ultimately, this was not a tale of survival alone. It was about how the presence of one soul can light the way for another in the darkest hours. And in that, we found something more lasting than fame: truth, tenderness, and the simple, unshakable strength of human connection. Since the accident, a new fund has been created by Xiao Zhan's team to support emergency healthcare for underprivileged youth. Wang Yibo's fan clubs have started a global "No One Waits Alone" campaign, supporting people waiting outside ICU rooms around the world. Therapists in South Korea and Canada have begun using the story to teach emotional literacy and trauma response in youth groups. This wasn't just a moment. It became a movement. So the next time you walk past someone crying in a hospital corridor, or scroll past another tragedy online, remember this story, because sometimes all it takes is one voice message, one promise to share hot pot again, one hand that refuses to let go. Red heart, if this story touched your heart, please consider subscribing to our channel. We tell the stories behind the headlines of friendship, humanity, and truth. Clapperboard, new episodes every week. Real stories, real emotions, real people. Folded hands, thank you for watching. Hit the like, tap the bell, and share this with someone who might need to hear. You are not alone. Pushpin, follow us for more, because sometimes stories can save lives.